Good afternoon. I'm Fred Kemp, President and CEO of the Atlantic Council, and wow, members of the newly elected Colombian government, you have a sellout audience. You have a high degree of interest in this event, which is totally understandable. We're delighted to have you all here today, both in the room and virtually, for an important conversation on Colombia's future as the incoming cabinet of Abelardo de la Espriella prepares to take office on August the 7th. I'm honored today to welcome today's speakers, Colombia Vice President-elect José Manuel Restrepo, Minister-designate of Foreign Affairs, Omar Bula. I've also just met the Commerce Minister, the Defense Minister. It's really an honor to have you all here. So the welcome the Minister-designate of Commerce, Industry, and Tourism, Mauricio Gómez Amín, Minister-designate of Defense, Major General Jorge Eduardo Mora Lopez, are joining us in the audience today. Vice President-elect, seeing you today is especially meaningful given your history with the Atlantic Council. Until you joined President-elect de la Espriella's ticket, among your many illustrious roles, you served as a non-resident senior fellow with our Adrian Arch Latin America Center, helping to shape our work on Colombia, regional development, trade and investment. I have investigated the 65-year history of the Atlantic Council. You now hold the distinction of being the highest-ranking former senior fellow in the Atlantic Council's 65-year history. Mr. Vice President-elect, we've had a few ministers here and there, but this is our first Vice President. I was talking to him in the hallway, and he's certain that the Atlantic Council affiliation pushed the vote over the line. So congratulations. We're proud to welcome you back to the Atlantic Council family in Washington and to begin a new phase of our work together. This is not the beginning of our work on Colombia. This is really the continuation of many years of work on Colombia under the Arch Latin America Center, under the leadership of Jason Marsack. In that spirit, I'm so glad to recognize several special guests in the audience. Adrian Arch, the Executive Vice Chair of the Atlantic Council and founder of our Adrian Arch Latin America Center. We quite literally wouldn't be here without her. Members of the Atlantic Council's board and partners, Ambassador Carolina Barco, Colombia's former foreign minister and ambassador of the United States, who has been a longtime partner of our work and will moderate today's conversation. We gather at a very important moment for Colombia. Government officials have already emphasized the importance of deepening Colombia's relationship with the United States. I think the presence of these ministers today says that. Part of the reason we're starting a few minutes late is they've had some incredibly important government meetings. I'm sure they'll reveal all the contents of those meetings in our conversation here. So even before taking office, to be here in Washington, meeting with U.S. and multilateral partners, and laying the groundwork for growth from day one says a lot about this government. At the Atlantic Council, our mission is working with partners and allies to shape the future. In that spirit, the Latin America Center has worked for nearly a decade to keep Colombia high on Washington's agenda and strengthen the partnership between our countries. About a decade ago, we launched the nonpartisan U.S.-Colombia Task Force, co-chaired at the time by Senators Ben Cardin and Roy Blunt, as is always the case, Democrat and Republican. That work continued through the U.S.-Colombia Advisory Group, and now the U.S.-Colombia Strategic Alignment Coalition. We have also made nonpartisan engagement with Colombia a key priority of our work. Throughout the electoral cycle, we hosted 2 Colombian-American members of the U.S. Senate for conversations on the future of U.S.-Colombia ties. Senator Bernie Moreno, Republican from Ohio, and Senator Ruben Gallego, Democrat from Arizona. As August 7th approaches, and in the months and years that follow, the Vice President-elect and Minister's delegate count on us as a partner and a platform for engaging Washington and deepening ties with the United States. As you prepare to take office amid tensions surrounding the handover, please also count on our support. A peaceful and orderly transition is in the interest of all Colombians and Colombia's partners around the world. Today, we look forward to hearing directly from the Vice President-elect and from the Minister-designate for Foreign Affairs about how the incoming government plans to address Colombia's fiscal deficit and public debt, foster a more open environment for business and investment, and shape the country's foreign policy and relationships with the United States and other key international partners. We'll begin today's program with initial remarks from Vice President-elect Restrepo, and then we'll be joined by Minister-designate Bula for a conversation moderated by Ambassador Barco, a member of our U.S.-Colombia Strategic Alignment Coalition. Jason Marsack, Vice President of the Atlantic Council and Senior Director of our Arch Latin America Center, will then offer closing remarks. Ambassador Barco will take a couple of questions also from the speakers, and you can submit those questions on askac.org. So just a couple of words about our keynote speaker before we begin. The Vice President-elect is an economist and an academic. He holds degrees from the Universidad del Rosario, a master's degree in economics from the London School of Economics, and a doctorate in higher education management from the University of Bath. He served as Colombia's Minister of Finance and Public Credit from May 2021 to August 2022, and Minister of Commerce, Industry, and Tourism from August 2018-2021. He served as rector at several Columbia universities. He comes to this job well prepared. So with that, please join me in welcoming Vice President-elect José Manuel Restrepo to the stage.
Well, first of all, thank you very much to all of you. I see faces from friends and people which have worked with me in other times, also academics and many other members of this community from the Atlantic Council. So thank you for this invitation, and I have to say that I accepted this invitation on behalf of the President-elected Abelardo de la Espriella, which, by the way, makes very happy Colombia now in this moment. And I would like to thank also Fred Camp, President of the Atlantic Council, the ministers designated here, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Trade, Minister of Defense. The Minister of Finance didn't come because he couldn't, but he was supposed to be here because of health issues. And Jason, thank you very much for this invitation, and especially the soul of this institution, Adrian Arch. So thank you for letting me to be here also. I have to say that this is my first time physically in Atlantic Council. We had a chance to be in many other meetings, not physically, virtually, and I feel like the Atlantic Council is just like my home. So I am very happy to be here, to have the opportunity to talk to you as elected Vice President, being the fact that I had a chance to be for almost maybe 1.5 years or 1 year, non-resident senior fellow of this institution. And I actually enjoy that a lot because I had a chance to write with people from this institution many papers together. And it was an extraordinary experience. So thank you for letting me to be here. I have to say that given the people that are in this event, I would like to begin expressing my gratitude to all of you for being here and for this invitation too. I have to say that the prevailing sentiment today in Colombia, I would say, is a combination between hope and optimism. And I have to say that because I have had the chance to meet many people in different places of Colombia. The last one was two people here at the airport coming from Bogota to Washington, D.C. And one of them, she was a girl. She came to me and she started to cry. And then she gave me a hug. And she said, "You gave us optimism. You gave us trust and confidence in the future of this country. Please help us in the next future." And that kind of situation has happened to me in many other times, which means that that's the hope that they are feeling nowadays. Why is that hope? I would say that the hope is because of many reasons, maybe related to what we have said during the campaign. Hope on how to reestablish in Colombia integrity in the way to deal with public management, to confront corruption in Colombia. Hope maybe because we have said, and we are going to fulfill that, we are working for the most vulnerable people of Colombia, for those who are suffering from health issues, suffering in education, suffering because of extortion and terrorism, suffering because of the lack of employment. Also, maybe hope because we are convinced that we can get prosperity in Colombia, because we said that we are going to attain freedom for our people and security for them. Hope because we have said that Colombia needs nowadays to reinforce the private initiative, as opposed to the idea that statization is the solution. We don't think that. By the way, today we have the worst number in more than 4 decades in Colombia in terms of the relationship between investment and GDP. We want to strengthen the private initiative in Colombia, and through that way create more employment, more opportunities for the people. Also, maybe hope because of the respectfulness for our institutions. As you know, President-elected Abelardo de la Espriella, once he received the credentials for being president and myself for being vice president, the first thing that we did is we went to the judicial system of Colombia. And we had meetings with all the institutions of the judicial system. And we told them, here we are to respect institutions in Colombia, because we do think that we are a democracy, something that hasn't happened during the last 4 years in the history of our country. Also, we went to the central bank and we had a meeting with the main board of the central bank. And we said the same thing. We are coming here to respect institutions. We are coming here, even though maybe you are going to take decisions that you don't like, but we are going to be here to respect those decisions. So that means that there is a change in Colombia, a real change in Colombia. That's exactly what represents Abelardo de la Espriella. So thanks to the Atlantic Council for letting me to share what we are thinking. That hope means a new moment in the relationship between Colombia and the US. Maybe a moment in which we could have a longer strategic partnership. And we have said that maybe that strategic partnership could be related to 5 pillars. The first one is how to expand the bilateral trade and investment. And we have had the chance to be here 23 days after the election to send that message to the United States and to the world and to multilateral institutions. Here we are in this city, in this country, to send the message that we want to expand that bilateral trade, also to attract more investment from the world. Here we are also to build strategic infrastructure programs, to go back to the idea that we have lost during the last 4 years, the idea of PPP models, private and public partnership models, which, by the way, 4 years ago, Colombia was one of the 3 main countries in the world with the best PPP model in the world. And we have lost that. So we are here to say we are going to go back on that idea. We are going to respect concessions. We are here also to build secure supply chains. We are here also to bring economic security and national security, to build that in our country and to help to build that also in the United States. To see Colombia as a strategic partner, as a platform of democratization in Venezuela. We think that we could have a win-win-win partnership model in that relationship. Because if you think about that, maybe the best way to increase the growth of Colombia is through that, through the possibilities that we could have in the private investment in terms of food, basic services, basic goods, and also medicines. Industry that could be offered from Colombia, even including industry, American industry placed in Colombia in a way of a nearshoring model. So we can do that, and we can take advantage on that. And just imagine the possibility that also we could have to import gas from Venezuela in a different way. So there are many opportunities over there. And through all of this, at the end, working together to safeguard democracy. Because what we have in the last election was the possibility to lose our democracy, the possibility to destroy our institutions. And we preserved, through the election, the possibility to be again in democracy, to be again in respecting institutions. Institutions and democracy, which hasn't been respected by the current government of Colombia, even nowadays, today. So this is a moment in which we have to go back to the idea that democracy and institutions are quite relevant things in the future of our region, in this case, in the future of Colombia. And we are also here to foster prosperity together, in this case, with the United States. At the end, we are here to work together with you, with all of you, with American investors, with the world too, to transform that original hope, which I talked about before, into action. Because we know that when you are elected to govern, we are going to govern. And that sounds easy, or that sounds normal. That hasn't been the normality during the last 4 years. This is a moment in which you need a government that governs, and we're going to do that. We are going, as I said, to transform hope into action. Just help us to do that in the next 4 years. Thank you very much. Embajadora.
Muy bien, buenísimo. Okay. Vice President-elect Restrepo, thank you very much for that very motivating and enthusiastic and with such clarity about the optimism that we have in Colombia and the great hope we have that we will be moving forward again. So you have given us a sense of the direction and of the hope and the priorities we will discuss now in the upcoming questions about what we're doing in the months ahead. I would also like to present to all of you, or give a warm welcome to Omar Bula Escobar, Colombia's Minister-designate of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Bula is an international business management and geopolitics expert with more than 2 decades of experience across public and private sectors, a former United Nations representative, and he has held senior leadership roles in Africa, the Middle East, Europe, Latin America, managing very complex humanitarian and development operations, including in conflict-affected countries such as Sudan, Somalia, and Iraq. So a very complete background. Since his appointment, he has identified strengthening Colombia's diplomatic service and advancing cyber diplomacy, as well as expanding trade relationships among his priorities. So thank you very much for joining us today. I would like to use our remaining time to look more closely on the agenda that you will be carrying out, the transition and some of the major issues that you will be addressing at the beginning, both of you. And we'll leave some time for the audience at the end to have a few questions, if possible. So Vice President-elect Restrepo, you are leading the transition right now across 22 sectors and already raised some concerns about several areas of the government with very limited fiscal space, which makes it even more complicated, and urgent needs in security, energy, health, which challenge and demand a very immediate action. We're wondering, what are these steps that you see that must be taken to start addressing some of these issues as we start on the 7th of August and you start with the government the next 4 years?
Well, thank you, Ambassador, and thank you also, Minister. I have to say that when you think about the transition, it has been difficult. I have to say that. But we have been working on that during the last 8 months. So we didn't wait just to receive some information from the government, because at the end, we can get a lot of information from different sources. So we have been for 8 months collecting information. Today, I have to say that we could have 80% of that process of transition. But the main point there is that even though we are in a moment of hope, which is true, we are also facing maybe the most difficult challenges in the recent history of Colombia. And I can give many examples of that. I could start, for example, dear Fernando, with the humanitarian crisis that we're facing on health, which is absurd. 90% of the patients of Colombia, they don't get access to medicines nowadays, to full access to medicines. And that didn't happen in the past. It's just in the last 4 years in which the system has been destroyed. The current president called that shoe, and we are in the shoe. But the second one is that we're facing almost a fiscal collapse. When you see the numbers are very complicated. During the last 2 years, for example, the fiscal primary deficit has increased from minus 0.3% to more than minus 4.2% in just 2 years. So that means that the public debt has increased to record numbers in the history of Colombia, even higher than during the pandemic. And we haven't been in the pandemic in the last 4 years, or maybe it's another kind of pandemic. But the main point there is that we are in a clear risk in fiscal terms. The other thing that we're facing is another clear risk on energy insecurity. And the numbers show that. The possibility of an energy blackout, it is real for Colombia. And actually, I haven't said that. That has been said by the firms and by the experts in Colombia. Why is that? Because of the lack of interest on investment in generation and transmission. And we have to deal with that now. We have also a growing and exponential numbers on insecurity. When I compare 2022 to 2025, for example, in terms of kidnapping, it has increased more than 100%. When you compare those numbers, in terms of terrorism, it has increased more than 60%. And when you compare those numbers on extortion, it has grown on more than 50%, which means that we are in a real pandemic of insecurity and criminality, and the Minister of Defense knows that. So what do we need? Because the point here is that we came here to solve the problems, not to diagnose or do a diagnosis over those problems. We came here to promote more and more investment, and through that way try to solve, in terms of the income of the country, more resources. But in order to do that, you need trust and you need confidence. You need to cut red tape, and in a very strong and deep way. You have also to build better public management, which means cooperation with the private sector, technical assistance. And we came here, for example, to the IMF, to the Secretary of Treasury, actually to ask for assistance in that process. We have to build that also through technical rigorness. We have lost that in the energy sector. We have lost that in finance. We have lost that in health. We have to go back again to build technical rigorness. And we have also to strengthen again channels of cooperation in all of those sectors, including security, for example, with more intelligence to deal and confront narco traffic and drug dealing, to build more innovation, to build a country which can be focused on IT, on the future of energy, for example. So I think that if you ask me which are those big problems, I would say many. But the important thing is not the problems, but the solutions. What it is important is that we are here to solve those problems. We accepted the possibility of being president and vice president to deal with those problems and to do the transition again to a country that can be able to have more opportunities. And as I said before, to build that hope in action.
Thank you very much. So I will ask the Foreign Minister that you have been talking about rebuilding Colombia's diplomacy and strengthening the country's role in the region. How does the incoming government plan to work with international partners and deepen diplomatic ties and cooperation? And how do we envisage Colombia, the role in the hemisphere?
Thank you. Big question.
Big question.
Thank you, Vice President. Thank you, Carolina. I'm very pleased to meet you. Thank you to all of you who are around. I see that it is a big crowd. Thank you, Mr. Kemp. Thank you, Adrian. I'm sorry I called you by your first name, but it was so I was so happy to meet you when I came in. I retake many of the words that the Vice President mentioned, clearly about hope. I want to underline it once again. I have felt it in the 4 or 5 days that I have since I was nominated. Every person that I talk to, whether explicitly or not, mentions the fact that there's a light at the end of the tunnel in regards to Colombia's future. Colombia was always one of the best partners of the United States of America from the beginning, for many, many decades. And that clearly changed in the last years. We have a lot to rebuild in every sector, as the Vice President mentioned, and foreign affairs is not the exception. To make sure of it. There's a lot to do, and of course, a lot to do with the other ministries, because we are the umbrella of many ministries in the international arena, and therefore we have to work together, and we will work together. We have a very motivated team. I'm sorry, I'm not yet answering your question, but I'll get there in a second. We have a very motivated team, all of us. I think I've never seen it myself, after 30 years in the United Nations, another realm of life, of course, but I never saw so much motivation and so much belief in wanting to rebuild a country. And the word rebuilding really fits here, because what was left after the last 4 years, I don't want to talk about the past, I prefer to talk about the future, about rebuilding. But indeed, in many aspects, the public administration of Colombia has been affected direly in the last years. So we have to start again. We have to solve a lot of problems to begin with. But at the same time, in parallel, we'll be establishing new policies and new directions. I spoke indeed about the modernization of the foreign policy apparatus, and I think it's supremely important, not only recovering the time lost during the last 4 years, but also because I understand we're in a very, very important global geopolitical juncture. You know better than I, you're here in Washington, the big changes that are happening now worldwide and how what I call the tectonic plates of geopolitics are reaccommodating. And this is a moment where we have to find a place, you know, for the future for Colombia. Firstly, of course, reconstructing the relationship that we had before with the United States and Israel, which has been one of the priorities, also mentioned by President de la Espriella, and with like-minded countries. By like-minded countries, I mean in this current juncture, I'm sure you're aware that Western civilization as a whole is being questioned as of late, and I think that there's a big opportunity for the United States and the hemisphere as a whole to hold that banner up of Western values, democracy, liberties, the value of the individual, all these values that have been lost now due to many reasons in the past. So we would like Colombia to translate that partnership with the United States into us being, with other countries in the region, of course, the banner of what the President Trump and his team are trying to achieve in this hemisphere during the next 4 years. Modernization, yes, I think that's the policy for all of the ministries somehow. No? We have to modernize to be able to streamline. The fiscal situation is clearly not to our advantage at this point in time, so we'll be cutting costs all over, but not for the sake of cutting costs, for the sake of building and shaping a much. By the way, I want the Atlantic Council to help us shape our future. I forgot, as you offered, Mr. Kemp, thank you. So basically redirecting it, making it more professional. We will concentrate on professional staff. That's one of the things that was, undervalued, I would say, by the past government. So we have to professionalize our staff. We need people to speak to the extent possible more than one language, was not the case. You might be surprised, but it was one of the things that was not required by the previous government. I would say coming back to normal. We have to come back to normal and do better than normal. So we're ready for that. I spoke indeed about concentrating on economic diplomacy, commercial diplomacy, and cyber diplomacy. The two first, of course, in line with the President de la Espriella's objective to make a collegiate approach to making the country a more private-oriented enterprise, which is what I intend to do also with the ministry itself. As a previous manager, I like things being very sharp and straight cut. We will not have any, as we say in French, on va crémer. No, we'll take all the cream off and we'll deal with the very specifics in terms of achieving our objectives. And that will imply, of course, working together with other ministries, particularly for foreign relations, to work together with the Ministry of Finance, with other ministries, to achieve that objective of President de la Espriella to make of Colombia a real commerce-oriented country, trade-oriented country, which I think the Vice President knows better than I how to do it. But of course, I'm there to help, Vice President. That's where we're working together. Secondly, we have the problem of transnational organized crime. I think this is not a secret for anybody. Unfortunately, before President de la Espriella called me up to help, I had written books about it. I was very worried about the fact that not only Colombia, but many countries in the region have underestimated what this means, have closed their eyes during the last 20, 30 years at the growth of this monster. It is a monster. And I have got goosebumps, sorry, to tell you the truth. It is a monster that has taken over our country, has taken over half of our sovereignty. It is a monster that has penetrated all of our institutions. It's probably one of the most important or difficult obstacles we will have ahead, because it has penetrated the entrails of both of the public sector, even of the private sector. And the population as a whole is now living kind of in a kind of acceptable statu quo, which I don't think it's is not acceptable to us and to President de la Espriella. We have to change that. That takes time, of course. But I'm sure that with the Atlantic Council, and having read all of your initiatives, I'm sure that we will have very good advice from your side, and we're expecting it as well for you to help us shape our future, as I mentioned. In terms of relationships with other countries, apart from the United States and Israel, of course, when I mentioned like-minded countries, I meant precisely that, civilizational-wise. I think we have the opportunity as a hemisphere I've always spoken about the fact that Colombia was not fully aware, and Latin America as a whole wasn't fully aware of what was happening outside its borders. And therefore, we were kind of inheriting whatever happened outside our borders. And I think we should be opening our eyes to what's happening around the world. But on the other hand, we're also very protected because we're homogeneous, religiously, culturally, etc. And we are not going through yet what other countries in the Northern Hemisphere are going, like in the case of Europe, in the case of the United States, certain phenomena that have not yet touched us. Therefore, the fact of being isolated somehow from the world helps us in this regard, to take advantage, to take steps before that type of phenomena reaches. And that, I think, can be built by reminding our people that we're all Western, that we have Western values, that Western values include democracy, liberties, free market, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's not clear enough, and we have to work together with the Ministry of Education and other relevant ministries to achieve that. We have a lot of work ahead, of course, but we're ready to do it for sure. As I mentioned, transnational organized crime, I would like definitely to sit with your experts to talk about it, one of the main subjects. And we will be revising our relationships, of course, with other nations and with multilateral organizations as well, because, in the sense of cost cutting, but also of streamlining our relationships and being less subject to the decisions taken by multilateral organizations and being more sovereign about our decisions in regards to global agendas. A lot of work to do, for sure. We are very happy. We have all the ministers here. And as I mentioned at the beginning, very motivated to work with you. I hope I answered your question, Carolina.
Very thoroughly. Thank you very, very much. And so I think, given that our time is so limited, we'll have one last question for the Vice President, and then we'll have a question from the audience. So, Vice President-elect, yeah, we're now talking about Colombia's growth and the importance of the regions. And the President has talked very much about the importance of working with the regions, bringing security, making them also the place for growth and for inclusion. I was wondering if you would tell us a bit about this policy and what the steps we will be taking.
You know, Ambassador, that, during this visit, we have had the chance to discuss that with multilaterals like the World Bank, IDB, for example. We had done that in the past with CAF and many other institutions. And we have said that when we were elected, one of the main drivers of growth that we see in the next future is actually the regions of Colombia. I think that we haven't taken advantage enoughly of that possibility, the possibility of using those regions as a platform of growth. When you think about that, and you can read, for example, the book written by Alejandro Salazar, who actually was part of the campaign, you see that you have enormous possibilities around different parts of Colombia if you build that regional development. That's why President Abelardo de la Espriella, he said, I want to do the transition in the regions. Today is in Santander, for example. I think yesterday was in Boyacá, and before that was in Casanare. Why is that? Because we know that the only way in which Colombia can grow more is by taking advantage of those opportunities that you can find over there in the regions. But of course, that means development. You cannot go, for example, to Buenaventura to develop Buenaventura if you don't have access to water, for example. You cannot have access to Tierra Bomba in Cartagena if you don't have access to basic public services. So you have to deal with that. You have to solve those problems. That's the only way in which the country can be developed properly. When you see the numbers today of Colombia, 51% of the reasons for growth come from the public sector during the last 3 years. That's absurd. We have to increase the interest in the private sector to invest in Colombia. Hopefully now we have seen interest from different firms, from different investors who say, maybe this is the time to invest in the region, in Colombia. And if we connect that, the regions plus the interest from the private sector, you can get possibilities for growth. And that's relevant because structurally, the country itself has a challenge. I was reading a study done by McKinsey, which says that in developed countries during the last 15 years, 2/3 of the growth come from productivity and 1/3 from increasing the workforce. In Colombia, during the last 15 years, the numbers are different. 2/3 of the growth come from increasing workforce and 1/3 from productivity. If we don't increase productivity, we are not going to increase the potential growth of our country. And that's relevant since at the same time, demographic numbers are decreasing. The fertility rate is decreasing. Just one city like Bogotá has a fertility rate of 0.8, Medellin 0.9, less than Japan, which is a country with low levels of fertility, low demographics. So structurally, you need to give an answer to that topic. The only way to do it is first confronting ideology, fundamentalism, the one that we have lived during the last 4 years. The government didn't like oil and gas. They didn't like mining. They didn't like housing. They didn't like infrastructure. So they destroyed those sectors. Well, you need them. You need them. You need, for example, the mining sector. Why? Because this is strategic. You cannot do a transition without mining, copper, lithium, and so on. You need that. You need, of course, infrastructure to connect the country and the country with the world. You need housing to create employment, to build the idea of Colombia as a land of propietarios. So I think that this is a moment in which we have to turn on those sectors which were turned off by the government. And you have to turn on others, agro-industry with technology, being more productive, even developing clusters like the Altillanura cluster, the Mato Grosso from Colombia. You have also to turn on the sector of services based on knowledge. Ricardo Hausmann, when I was in a meeting with him, I invited him to be part of the mission of internationalization of Colombia. Once he told me, Colombia is more India, less China, which means you have capacity of talent, in excess. You have to take advantage of that on sectors of services based on knowledge. Argentina did it with the law of science. We want to do that with Minister Gómez, who is here. He's leading that chapter of the agenda of growth. And he's working on that today, yesterday, and during the last 22 days. And we want to turn on also the energy sector. But we have to cut the red tape, because with those licenses, community consultation processes, which are, they last forever, it is impossible to do it. And we want to turn on also the tourism sector, sustainable tourism. There we have opportunities. But to do that, we have to take concern on certain characteristics of Colombia. 5.2 million of small businesses, micro businesses, and non-formal, and 1.8 million formal. But from those, 90% micro businesses. If we want to grow, it's not only take into account regions, is also taking into account the kind of productive sector that we have. And that means small and medium enterprises, especially small enterprises, and how to move them from informality to formality. Those are the kind of things that we have to do in this new policy of growth. And it doesn't come alone. You cannot see firms as the cow to be milked, like what has happened in the last 4 years. You cannot, understand firms as enemies of the public sector. You have to work with them together to build innovation and try to dream how Colombia is going to be a leader in Latin America, maybe as a deep tech capital or as a capital of the fourth industrial revolution, including artificial intelligence, quantum computing, robotics, and so on, biotechnology, and so on. I think that Colombia, as President Abelardo de las Espriellas said during the campaign, can be the miracle nation. And that happened to Korea, South Korea. That happened to Singapore, to Chile, Ireland. Why Colombia cannot? Being the number 2 in the world on biodiversity, being a country with different regions, with potentialities, and also having the most entrepreneurial people in Latin America according to the World Economic Forum. Let's liberate our capacities. Let's dream on that. And let's put that dream in action, as I said before.
Well, thank you for a very, very complete Your explanation is so complete that the questions I have here, and we appreciate that the audience has made these wonderful questions, have been answered, most of them, by the Vice President already. Because I will just give you an example. The first one says, how will the new administration incentivize the heavy investments needed in our infrastructure to ensure the oil and gas industry remain a strong, reliable pillar for Colombia's fiscal security? So I don't know if you want to add just 2 more words and...
One word. We have to solve the problem of Ecopetrol. Because it used to be in the past the engine of growth, the engine of income too. And what we have seen now is a destruction, starting from the strategic destruction. So I think that the first decree that we have to issue is a decree which allows us to open the possibilities of new explorations in Colombia on gas and oil. Why you are, prohibiting that? It doesn't have sense. Also, doing non-conventional exploration in Colombia and in the world. Also, solving the operational and financial problems of Ecopetrol. Solving the governance problems in which the government has changed decisions that they were made by the company, the governance of the company. And also, you have to do something about reputation. So you have to, as soon as possible, organize the assembly of Ecopetrol, change the board, and change the president of the institution. Because at the end, the problem of Ecopetrol is strategic, but it's also in terms of management. If you don't change that management, you are going to destroy that company. The company used to be the
churro? La joya?
No, la lagartija, la iguana.
Ah, la iguana.
The lizard. And now it's como una lagartija pequeña.
A little lizard. Okay, well, thank you. Yes.
I think there's an issue, I forgot to mention, the issue of trust that you have brought up several times. People have lost trust in Colombia. Countries have lost trust in Colombia. Organizations have lost trust. We have to build trust with results, and that's what we're all focused on. And I think that this is the beginning of rebuilding trust, and we will do our best, our utmost best, to be trusted again in the international arena in the next years. Thank you. Just to add that, thank you.
Thank you so very much, and you can see the very, very complete answers we have gotten. I would ask Jason if you would please join us now for some for some comments. And I want to thank both the Vice President and the Minister for very, very interesting and very, very complete presentations. Now we know why Colombia is so hopeful and so optimistic.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I want to, first off, thank you so much, Vice President-elect Restrepo. Wonderful to have you. Minister-designate of Foreign Affairs, Bula, for your joining us today and laying out comprehensively the priorities that you will carry in office. And of course, thank you, Ambassador Barco, for not only guiding today's discussion, but also for your leadership for many, many years as part of our U.S.-Colombia Strategic Alignment Coalition. Today's discussion underscored the significant challenges, but also the opportunities that lie ahead, from restoring fiscal sustainability and strengthening investor confidence to creating growth that reaches all regions of Colombia. But for those priorities to move forward, the will expressed by Colombian voters and certified by the country's electoral institutions must be respected through a peaceful and orderly transfer of power. The United States and other members of the Shield of the Americas have reinforced that message, and so have we. At the Adrian Arch Latin America Center, we will continue following the transition closely, calling for respect for Colombia's democratic institutions and elevating Colombia's importance as a strategic partner for the United States. Through our U.S.-Colombia Strategic Alignment Coalition, we have worked throughout this electoral cycle to strengthen democratic governance, address evolving security challenges, and identify practical opportunities to deepen trade, investment, and bilateral cooperation. In the months and years ahead, please count on the Atlantic Council to be a partner for Colombia in helping to solve challenges, but also, as discussed today, advance our shared priorities in a practical way. We are committed to elevating again Colombia as a key strategic partner. Vice President-elect Restrepo, as Fred Kemp noted at the outset, it is incredibly meaningful to have you back here at the Atlantic Council. During your time as a non-resident senior fellow, you helped shape our work, actually on many of the subjects discussed today, on trade investment, on regional security, Colombia's role in Venezuela's economic recovery. You also contributed an excellent chapter on Colombia to the Atlantic Council's 2026 Atlas Freedom and Prosperity Around the World that was published just before you joined the De La Espriella presidential campaign. We look forward to building on this partnership in your new role and continuing our work together to strengthen the U.S.-Colombia relationship. Minister-designate Bula, and to all the ministers-designate in attendance, we also look forward to working closely with each one of you. The Atlantic Council will be a partner in strengthening ties with Washington at a moment of great opportunity to modernize and expand cooperation between our countries. As we conclude, I'd like to thank non-resident senior fellow Jorge Guzman for all his work in organizing today's event, Isabel Palacios for her outstanding support. I would now like to invite Minister-designate Mauricio Gómez Amín, Minister-designate Jorge Eduardo Mora Lopez, as well as Adrian Arch and Fred Kemp to join us on stage for a group photo. To our in-person audience, we ask that you please remain seated until the delegation has left the room. And thank you again all for joining us today. Have a wonderful afternoon.